amazing father shelters a young girl for one night. Discover her surprising millionaire secret. The wind howled outside Jim's modest home in Creston as he hurried to tighten the last bolt on a rusty pickup. The air held the smell of rain-soaked earth, and each rumble of thunder echoed the mounting stress within him. He glanced at the clock, mentally calculating the hours left before Sarah came home from her friend's place. His hands, forever stained with grease and oil, felt heavy with responsibility. Providing for his daughter came first, but as he wiped sweat from his forehead, a sudden, desperate knock at the door halted his thoughts. He opened the door to find a girl, no older than 16, drenched and shaking, standing in the flickering light of his porch. "Please, I need help," she stammered, her frightened eyes searching his. Against a backdrop of inner hesitation, all that he had ever believed in, loyalty, compassion, standing up for those who couldn't stand for themselves, crying out for action, he stepped aside and invited her in. As Jim prepared a bowl of soup, worry gnawed at him. He didn't know this girl, yet her pitiful state stirred his protective instincts. What if this was a mistake? His mind raced. Could she be dangerous? A scam? Or worse? But the knowing ache in his heart pushed those fears aside. He sat across from her, watching as her fragile frame shivered despite the warmth of the house. As she spoke her story, Jim discovered that Emily had fled from a life of expectations and pressures, escaping a gilded cage. Her client's success in digital art remained hidden, overshadowed by her parents' relentless pursuit of perfection. In that moment, Jim couldn't help but empathize. He'd fought his own battles against the burdens of obligation, the expectations that had closed in on him years ago. She was a mirror reflecting back his struggles, but in his heart a new sense of determination ignited. Could he help her reclaim her freedom when he could barely keep up with his own challenges? Before he could dwell further on that thought, a familiar figure appeared at his doorstep, an old acquaintance from his past, face shadowed by the storm's chaos. "Jim," he called out, his voice sinister against the howling wind. Jim's heart sank. This man knew the secrets he had buried. He could expose everything, unravel the threads of trust he'd begun to weave with Emily, possibly putting her directly in harm's way. Jim felt the fear grip him tight. Protecting Emily could jeopardize everything he had fought for, his family, Sarah's peace. What twisted loyalty chained him to this ghost from his past, ready to reclaim its hold? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. His mind raced, thinking of Emily's fragile talent, the glimmer of hope he could see in her eyes, juxtaposed with his instincts of self-preservation. What if he had to choose between protecting her and confronting the truth of his life? As storm clouds loomed above, a critical decision formed in his mind. Could he trust his instincts to guide him through this tempest, battling the shadows of his past and giving Emily the chance she so desperately needed? Sitting in silence, Jim's heart ached under the weight of uncertainty, his gaze fixated on the door, the thin barrier between safety and the chaos that threatened both of their lives. The figure outside loomed ominously, and Jim felt the air thicken between him and the door. His instincts screamed at him to protect Emily, yet a part of him paralyzed with fear. The knock echoed through the house, stirring Sarah's photo on the mantel and reminding him of everything he stood to lose. Torn, he glanced back at Emily, whose eyes betrayed panic, yet also a flicker of resolve. "Wait here," he whispered, still unsure how to shield her from whatever confrontation was coming. The weight of his decision crushed him. Every moment burned precious with urgency. He opened the door, his heart racing, bracing for a confrontation he never wanted. "What do you want?" Jim demanded, his voice steadier than he felt. The man's face twisted into a sardonic grin. "Funny seeing you here, Jim. Still playing the hero, I see. But I'm not your enemy tonight." There was a predatory glint in his eye, a flash of something darker that made Jim's stomach churn. "Enough of this. Just leave," Jim said, seeking to regain control. "Not until we talk," the man replied, stepping forward as Jim instinctively shifted sideways, blocking his path into the house. "You think you can save her and yourself? Newsflash, both of you are trapped in the same storm." In that fleeting moment, Jim grappled with the man's words, feeling them hit home more than he wanted to admit. Had he really taken Emily in to save her, or to escape an uncomfortable truth about himself? "Go!" he repeated, emotions clashing inside him like thunder. "You don't know what you're talking about." But as the stranger's expression shifted to something more menacing, Jim realized he needed to act. Protecting Emily meant facing this shadow from his past. It wasn't just about fear anymore. It was about breaking the chains that had bound him for years. How could he let her face the same fate? "Step inside. You're not doing this on my porch." Jim took a deep breath, challenging the man's intentions. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a chance for Jim to reclaim his narrative. The man hesitated, then smirked as he stepped across the threshold, eyes scanning the modest surroundings. "Thought you'd hide forever, huh? Your little life here must seem cozy, but it's fraught with more risks than you realize." Jim forced himself to remain calm, fighting each wave of anxiety. Here was the moment he'd dreaded, confronting the sins of his past. They were standing in his living room now, the scent of leftover soup mingling awkwardly with tension. He glanced back to see Emily watching from the kitchen, fear and curiosity etched on her face. "You have no idea what I've built, what I'm protecting," Jim declared, igniting a fire within. This wasn't just a fight for someone else. It was a battle for himself. The man raised an eyebrow, intrigued, perhaps sensing the shift in Jim's demeanor. "Built? Or is it merely a facade? The storm's coming, Jim. How long do you think you can keep her safe? Or yourself?" Jim's heart raced. The truth he had been avoiding condensed into a single moment. He needed to turn this encounter into an opportunity, a way to not only protect Emily, but also to reclaim all he had lost over the years. "No more games," Jim said, narrowing his focus on the figure in front of him. "You want something, you make it clear now." The man leaned in, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine interest lay beneath the bravado. "All right, Jim, let's cut to the chase. You're going to need to rethink your values, and soon." Jim felt the pulse of uncertainty, but also an emerging clarity. If he was to protect Emily and himself, he needed to confront the truths that had haunted him. He had shown a glimpse of his own worth against the storm. Now, faced with an unexpected confrontation, he understood that confronting the problems of the past would be the only way forward. "Tell me your terms," Jim demanded, readying himself for whatever challenge lay ahead. As the man opened his mouth to respond, Jim steeled himself for what could be the turning point that would redefine not only their lives, but also his commitment to protecting those he cared about. As the words fell across the room, he braced for the possible revelation that could crack open the door to a new reality. The man leaned back slightly, studying Jim as if he were a specimen under a microscope. The tension in the room quivered like an electrical charge, thick with unasked questions and veiled threats. "Let's say you still believe in heroes, Jim," he began, a slow smile creeping across his face. "What if I told you that being a hero isn't about saving people from storms, but knowing when to abandon ship?" Jim's mind raced. He had always viewed himself through the lens of responsibility, a protector by nature. But what if that perception had become a cage? His instincts clashed painfully with the words coming from the man's lips. Was this dark figure merely a catalyst for truth? Or was he a harbinger of deeper secrets buried within Jim's own life? Enough with the riddles. Just tell me what you want, Jim pressed, his voice more urgent now, edged with the realization that his foundations were beginning to shift. The man chuckled softly, almost mockingly. "All right, Jim. Let's get down to business. There's a stake at hand. Emily. She's your beacon, but she's also caught in something much larger than either of you could comprehend." The name fell like a stone in Jim's gut. Emily was more than just a girl he had sheltered. She represented hope, a way to reconnect with the part of himself he had nearly lost amidst his own fears and regrets. "What do you know about her?" he demanded, the protective instincts now surging to the forefront. The man waved his hand dismissively. "It's not about that. It's about the choices you'll have to make when the storm finally breaks. Are you ready to make those sacrifices? To reshape your life's narrative from protector to something else?" A flicker of anger ignited in Jim. It was a challenge, but also a revealing opportunity. The realization that protecting Emily may require a recalibration of his own understanding of sacrifice sent his thoughts spiraling. The man's taunting made him question if he was truly prepared for the consequences of the path he had chosen. "What are you suggesting?" Jim's heart raced with both frustration and a newfound determination. "This world works on power dynamics, Jim. You can choose to fight the storms alone, or you can learn to use the storms to elevate your own position. Maybe it's time to rethink what being a father and a guardian really means," he said, his tone laced with an unsettling mix of sincerity and manipulation. Jim felt a veil lift slightly, revealing the complex entanglements surrounding his life and choices. Would he remain a steadfast protector at the risk of stagnation, or consider the darker strategic paths that lay ahead? As he caught Emily's gaze from the kitchen, overwhelmed yet curious, an uncomfortable truth solidified in his mind. Staying within his current moral boundaries might not keep her safe. The man stepped forward, invading Jim's personal space. "It's time to wake up to your limitations, Jim. You don't just protect, it's about navigating the storm and its aftermath. You have the potential to be more than you've allowed yourself to be." A deep conflict wrinkled Jim's brow. The insinuation jabbed at both his conscience and aspirations. Here he stood, an old man fighting against the pain of his past and the terrifying prospect of a new future. But could this man truly be offering him a chance to redefine what it meant to be a father? "Do we have a deal?" the man challenged, tilting his head in contemplation, almost as if he seemed to relish the inner turmoil brewing within Jim. As those heavy words hung in the air, Jim felt the weight of a pivot point. This could be turning his protective instincts into a broader approach to existence, one where outcome and sacrifice were paired with ambition. He took a deep breath, ready to confront not just this stranger, but the fears that had gripped him for so long. "What do you have in mind?" he asked, fully aware of the risks involved, knowing that every choice would mark a new direction. As the man opened his mouth to speak again, Jim could feel the world around him stretching thin, a thread that could snap at any moment, leading him into uncertainty. The revelation of Emily's fate danced tantalizingly ahead, promising new understandings but also deeper responsibilities. The question loomed, was he willing to embrace the storm for her sake, or would he cling too tightly to a simplistic notion of protection? The moment was charged. The next few words could change everything. The man's eyes gleamed with a predatory curiosity as he finally answered Jim's question. "Meet me tonight at the old warehouse by the docks. That's where you'll find the real power at play. The decisions you make there will mark a turning point in both your life and Emily's." Each word landed more heavily than the last, and Jim's mind raced, straddling the divide between fear and eagerness. Deep down, a part of him craved clarity amidst chaos, but the unknown also sent a shiver down his spine. Was he willing to plunge into an abyss for Emily's sake, or was he merely grasping at straws? "Why should I trust you?" he managed, his voice a mix of skepticism and hope. His heart thundered in his chest, a reminder of how easily faith could be misconstrued. Trust isn't given, it's earned. But consider the alternative, ignoring the storms brewing just beyond your horizon, the man shot back, his voice smooth yet insidious. Refusing to act might put Emily in more danger than you can imagine. You owe it to her to at least explore this option. The urgency hung around them like a fog, obscuring the path forward. Emotions swirled within Jim, a potent blend of fear for Emily, anger at the man's manipulation, and the burgeoning excitement of potential change. Could sacrificing his ideals pave the way to a stronger foundation for her future? "I'll think about it," Jim replied, the words escaping his lips like an uneasy bargain. As he turned away, doubt gnawed at his resolve. Later that evening, Jim sat in the dim light of his living room, the walls closing in like an embrace thick with memory. The silence echoed with his anxious thoughts. Emily was next door, asleep, blissfully unaware of the labyrinth he found himself in. The peaceful rhythm of her breathing became a stark juxtaposition to the storm swirling inside him. What did it even mean to protect her? The juxtaposition of being a guardian while possibly turning into a predator of sorts, a man who might have to play the game of manipulation, filled him with a terrible sense of urgency. He stood and paced, each step as if it could stomp out the ambiguity clouding his mind. The man's effrontery toyed with everything he had ever lived for. Hadn't he taught Emily that true strength lay in kindness and integrity? But in this moment, kindness felt inadequate against the backdrop of the chaotic world they inhabited. Was it enough to hold on to moral ideals, or did survival demand a more audacious approach? Who would teach her that winning was about navigating treachery, or worse, sacrificing mindful principles? Resolutely, he pushed aside hesitation, drawing a deep breath. "I need a plan," he muttered to himself. "I can't go into that warehouse unprepared. There has to be a strategy if I'm diving into this." With a newfound determination, Jim grabbed a pen and paper, sketching out potential outcomes, contingencies, and possible allies he could call upon. It was no longer about passive defense, but calculated moves. As names appeared, Jim began to acknowledge the connections he had overlooked, acquaintances with the potential to lend him insight or support. The idea of network building flickered with promise, igniting a spark of hope that perhaps he could learn to navigate this tumultuous terrain while still keeping Emily safe. Hours slipped by as he honed his thoughts into a plan, until exhaustion forced him to collapse into a restless sleep. In those dreams, he found himself standing at the edge of the warehouse dock, shadows swirling and taunting him with unanswered questions. The urge to protect clashed violently with the need to act, spiraling into chaos that made him wake in a cold sweat. He rubbed his eyes, realizing the urgency of facing the decision ahead. He had one more day to gather himself, to prepare not just for an encounter with that man, but for the new truth awaiting him about what it meant to be a father. As dawn broke, illuminating his room with a flicker of resolve, Jim could feel destiny bending. A voice whispered within him, urging him forward into the storm. "Tomorrow will forge the path. You're no longer just protecting, you are learning to fight." The looming question remained. What revelation would await him at the warehouse, and how deeply would it challenge everything he thought he knew? The day unfolded like clockwork, each hour tightening Jim's focus as he prepared for the night ahead. Coffee brewed, its rich aroma curling through the air, mingling with the remnants of restless sleep that clung stubbornly to his thoughts. He forced himself to eat a light breakfast, his stomach a nervous knot, making it hard to swallow. Each bite felt like a heavy decision, a reminder that he was traversing a precarious line between safety and uncertainty. His mind darted between scenarios as he dressed, He felt the fabric of his shirt pull at his shoulders, grounding him with a sense of purpose. The man from the docks had awakened something dormant within him, a latent desire not just to protect, but to stand firm against whatever forces threatened his family. For so long, Jim had been a passive observer, letting life happen to him. Now he sensed that the time had come to seize control, to carve out an unmistakable identity of strength for both himself and Emily. Driven by determination, he compiled a briefcase with the essentials: a flashlight, an old baseball bat for defense, tiered lists of contacts he could reach out to for counsel or assistance, and the carefully developed plan he had mapped out the night before. With each item, he felt a sense of reality settle around him. He was no longer just reacting to external chaos. He was stepping onto the stage of his own life, ready to play for keeps. Moments morphed into hours as he evacuated thoughts of doubt. He could feel an electric undercurrent of anticipation coursing through his veins. He needed to arrive early to assess the warehouse and its surroundings. This wasn't simply about facing that man. It was about asserting his will, fortifying his resolve, and dismantling the webs of uncertainty that had ensnared him for too long. As evening approached, the sun dipped low, casting orange and purple hues across the sky and igniting hopes in Jim's chest. Yet, beneath that glow, his stomach churned with worry about Emily, her innocence resting precariously upon his shoulders. Would she bear the ramifications of his decisions? That thought darkened the bright colors of sunset, presenting a familiar struggle he had faced as a father, maintaining a balance between transparency and protection. The drive to the docks felt interminable, each passing mile stretching his anxiety but also fortifying his intent. He inhaled deeply, reminding himself of the necessity of this meeting. Emotions wrestled inside him, a blend of dread and boldness, of the despair of losing the life he once knew and the excitement of forging a new path. Arriving at the old warehouse, Jim parked at a distance, scanning the area like a hawk perched atop a tree. Shadows cloaked the structure, and he could feel the palpable tension coursing through the air, as though the very building held secrets waiting to be uncoiled. Everything around him felt surreal, a threshold lying just beyond his reach, demanding a leap of faith. He stepped out of his car and moved cautiously towards the entrance, his heartbeat quickening, matching the rhythm of his contemplations. With every footfall, he reminded himself of the stakes, not just for him, but more importantly, for Emily. Each breath bore the weight of his promise to her. As he neared the building, he caught a glimpse of movement through a grimy window, a silhouette that felt both ominous and strangely familiar. Jim hesitated, drawn not only to its presence, but to the implications of its arrival. What if this was the mind-altering moment that would define his relationship with Emily forever? The air thrummed with unspoken questions. He held tightly to the briefcase, a talisman propelling him into the unknown. What revelations awaited him inside? Would he emerge transformed or just deeper in the shadows of uncertainty? The moment had come. He couldn't turn back now. He reached for the door, pushing it open to reveal what lay beyond. Inside, the shadows breathed, waiting. The musty air of the warehouse enveloped Jim as he crossed the threshold, the eerie silence amplifying the echo of his footsteps. The beams of his flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a cluttered landscape of abandoned crates and faded graffiti that lined the walls. Memories of a different life flickered in his mind, places filled with laughter, safety, and warmth. He took a deep breath, reminding himself why he was there. This space was not just a relic of neglect, it represented a battleground where the stakes were higher than ever before. Advancing cautiously, he scanned the room. Each creak of the floorboard sent a shiver down his spine, but he steeled himself against the impulse to retreat. It was time to face what had consistently loomed in the background of his life. The silhouette he had seen flickering through the window solidified in his mind, morphing from a mere shadow to a potential adversary. Why did the figure feel so familiar? Was it fear or curiosity that drew him closer? As he approached the figure, the dim light illuminated the contours of a face he recognized, an unwelcome reminder of his past. It was Derek, a figure from his youth, now a ghost resurfacing in a guise he had never expected. Jim's heart raced. Their encounters years ago had always been charged with tension and betrayal. Was Derek here for retribution? Or was there an opportunity for understanding? "Jim," Derek greeted, voice dripping with ambiguity. "It's been a long time." The shift in Jim's thoughts was immediate. The room, once dominated by shadows, illuminated with a flood of memories. Shared laughter, blurred with shared transgressions. He quickly processed these thoughts while maintaining a facade of confidence. The confrontation transcended their personal history. It became a reflection of Jim's internal struggle. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. Derek leaned back against a wooden crate, his demeanor casual, but Jim could sense an ulterior motive simmering beneath the surface. "I've come to offer you a choice," he said, a hint of challenge in his tone. "There's a way for you to rid yourself of those worries dangling over your family's safety, but it'll cost you." Jim's instincts flared with suspicion. The idea of negotiating with Derek, a man associated with unsavory dealings, felt like a gamble too dangerous to entertain. Yet what if this was the opportunity he needed to protect Emily, his daughter? The internal conflict intensified, reminding him of all the moments he had wrestled with moral imperatives and existential worry. "What's your angle?" Jim pressed, the urgency of the situation molding his focus. Beyond Derek loomed the path of potential danger, but so did a possibility for forging connections in places he had avoided for too long. He needed to probe deeper, to challenge the dichotomy of fear and desire that Derek embodied. "There's a shipment coming in soon," Derek stated, his eyes narrowing in calculation. "With the right connections, you could access resources that could change everything for you." Jim contemplated the offer, grappling with the allure of power and influence against the moral decline that often accompanied such paths. The decision before him felt hefty. Could he really navigate this tumultuous current and emerge unscathed for Emily's sake? The implications of the choices he could make danced provocatively in his mind, awakening his buried ambition. For a fleeting moment, possibility wrapped around him in thick layers, but doubt lingered just as close. What kind of man would he become if he accepted Derek's proposal? "Just think about it, Jim," Derek continued, his voice low. It was a seed planted, but it would take root based on Jim's next moves. The shadows flickered, alive with the tension of unresolved choices. Jim's gaze locked onto Derek's, an electric moment sparking with potential. He was at a crossroads, one path leading back into safety, the other promising an adrenaline-laced thrill, tinged with risk. "Tomorrow could set everything in motion," Derek whispered, leaning closer, gauging Jim's response. What kind of man would he become? Clarity began to twist around the edges of uncertainty, but it wasn't merely a matter of his fate. It would reshape Emily's world too. As he stood there, torn, the gravity of his next move loomed larger than ever. It was time to choose, yet he had one final question. What happens if I say no? The air crackled with implications, both promising and terrifying. Would he accept the mantle of power or fall back into the shadows? The answer lay just beyond his comprehension. The weight of Derek's question hung in the air, a tangible force threatening to warp Jim's already strained psyche. Seconds stretched like an eternity as Jim weighed the implications of his inquiry. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through him, a rush that spoke to the primordial fight-or-flight instincts buried deep within. Derek's gaze, sharp and calculating, awaited his response, and Jim sensed the power dynamic shifting subtly beneath them. Are you willing to walk away from an opportunity that could provide for your daughter, to keep her safe? Derek's words ignited a spark of anger within Jim, but it was laced with a bitter truth. The very thought of Emily facing danger because of his refusal felt like a knife twisting in his gut, yet surrendering to that fear now would mean relinquishing the integrity he had fought to maintain for so long. "What happens if I say no?" Jim repeated, defiance firmly lacing his voice. "Just give me a straight answer." Derek's smirk faded, replaced by a calculating seriousness. "You risk everything staying uninformed. Ignorance is a welcome mat for trouble. You may be lucky today, but luck has an expiration date." Despite his inner turmoil, Jim felt a swell of determination. He had navigated the bleak corridors of life before, clawing back from near oblivion more than once. He couldn't let the fear of Derek's threats control his actions. "If I turn you down," Jim replied coldly, "I'll find my own way to protect Emily. You can believe that." Derek shrugged, eyebrows raising slightly. "Suit yourself. Just don't forget, in this game, staying out of the shadows isn't an option." With that, he turned to leave, shouldering the cloak of their past and leaving behind an uneasy stillness in the warehouse. As Derek disappeared into the recesses of night, Jim felt as though the ground beneath him shifted. He hadn't accepted the deal, but that didn't mean he walked away unscathed. The thought of Emily's safety gnawed at him relentlessly, and the lack of clarity on how to ensure that safety grew like creeping vines around his certainty. He peered into the dim corners of the warehouse, seeing only confusion and disarray. What skills did he possess that could turn this threat into safety? Jim had once thrived in a world of tangible challenges, laboring through the day with sweat and stubbornness. But the stakes had evolved. He was no longer merely securing his own place. He was a father intent on safeguarding his daughter. That night, Jim lay awake, haunted by Derek's proposition, the potential betrayal stinging his consciousness like an unhealed wound. He felt a growing resolve take root, an understanding that the old strategies wouldn't suffice anymore. The way forward would require ingenuity, courage, and perhaps a willingness to embrace vulnerabilities he had kept locked away. The following morning, beneath the dull winter sun, Jim began to chart his path. He researched connections, both enemies and allies, in a bid to learn about the underground world Derek inhabited. Instead of retreating, he would dig deeper. Perhaps there were discreet ways to gather information, to ensure Emily's security without losing himself to the corrupting allure of power. Each passing day transformed Jim. He became a hunter of sorts, compiling a web of leads, histories, and the unsavory tactics of those navigating the same shadows he had long evaded. As he followed each thread, his determination hardened. He was changing, and every new piece of knowledge was a confirmation of his evolution. What surprised him most was uncovering a resilience within himself he had long kept suppressed. The softer parts of him, the father, the protector, started to coalesce with his newfound tenacity. He questioned what his resources were, not just externally, but within himself. He had seen darkness, now he needed to harness it to forge his light. As he scoured each angle, Jim sensed he wasn't just engaging in a bidding war against Derek's proposition, he was fighting for a future. Conviction surged as he plotted every step forward, leading him towards the impending confrontation he knew was coming. The game was changing, and with every piece of intelligence gathered, an unsettling anticipation built inside him. There were uncharted territories awaiting his exploration. Time was slipping, and the ship he had to board loomed closer in the distance. Was he ready to face whatever lay ahead, to meet Derek head-on in an inevitable showdown, armed with not just what he had learned, but who he was becoming? As he prepared for what was next, Jim understood one truth unequivocally: the fight to protect Emily had just begun. The days melded into a blur of research and networking, and with each passing hour, Jim felt both empowered and dreaded. His determination to safeguard Emily took root deeply within him, fueling an insatiable drive for knowledge. He began frequenting the same underbelly where Derek moved, absorbing unwelcome realities that overshadowed urban life. Every conversation with a bartender, every whispered rumor in a dimly lit cafe, unearthed layers of danger he had never acknowledged before. There was a nagging anxiety that followed him around. How much of this world could he navigate without stepping into the very shadows he had promised himself to avoid? Each interaction felt charged, the stakes high, and Jim wrestled with his motivations. Was he becoming like Derek, drawn in by the thrill of power, or was he simply fighting for a chance to ensure a better life for Emily? One late afternoon, he found himself pacing an alley behind a bar, waiting for a contact. As the gusty wind swept through the narrow passage, he recalled his past struggles, the sacrifices that had driven him to this point. Seeking to protect Emily had brought forth this unexpected strength, a blend of grit and vulnerability that had previously existed in isolation within him. Yet, the price for strength felt steep. He feared losing pieces of himself in his pursuit. His contact arrived, a young woman with dark hair and wary eyes. "You have questions," she stated rather than asked, a practiced observation that betrayed her experience. "And you might have answers," he replied, sensing the inevitability that this conversation could either fortify his plans or expose them to dangerous scrutiny. "You're looking for Derek. He runs in circles that can get ugly, you know," she warned, crossing her arms defensively. Jim inhaled deeply, gathering resolve. "I need to know how to protect someone who means everything to me, whatever it takes." She scrutinized him, then her expression softened. "Everyone has something to lose. You need to decide how far you're willing to go to find the truth. But be careful. Once you're in, there's no way out." As she spoke, Jim felt the gravity of her words settle over him. The danger inherent in his quest hit him harder than before, yet the fear was now intertwined with an unyielding resolve. In this world of cutthroat alliances, might he forge his own path? "Help me," he urged. "I can't fight alone." She paused, visibly weighing her options. "Information has a cost. This isn't a game. Know that every choice will have consequences. Trust won't come easily here." His heart quickened at the thought of betrayal, the haunting legacy of broken trust that shadowed his past. But keeping Emily safe required him to step outside his comfort zone. "Do what you need to survive," she cautioned. "You'll need skills beyond your own. Find your allies carefully." As they finalized details, a spark ignited in Jim, a blend of hope and anxiety. He felt like a ship setting forth without a clear course, navigating treacherous waters. The wind howled as if echoing a foreboding whisper. This was only the beginning. That night, Jim sat across from a laptop in the solitude of his cramped apartment, the glow illuminating a face etched with steely resolve. He crafted a plan, each movement deliberate, defining a strategy to form connections and leverage others' information. He immersed himself in learning techniques foreign to him, gathering tools that bordered on cunning desperation. But when Emily peered in his direction, something shifted within him. He wasn't just plotting against Derek anymore. He was charting a course for their future. The emotional anchors of fatherhood weighed heavily, tugging him back to the softer parts of his being. As he painstakingly sifted through options, he realized this fight would require more than cunning tactics. It required a new understanding of heart and intellect. Suddenly, the looming confrontation with Derek morphed from an impending dread into a crucible for discovery. But the most unnerving thought crossed Jim's mind. What would he face if he succeeded in drawing Derek into the light? Would he be strong enough to endure the fallout? He closed his laptop for the night, grappling with the enormity of what lay ahead. The shadows cast by Derek's influence loomed larger than before, and sooner or later they would confront each other. What exactly would he uncover in the battle for Emily's safety? The tension thickened in the air as Jim mentally prepared himself for the inevitable moment his paths would collide with Derek's once more. The morning sun broke through the dirty window of Jim's apartment, illuminating the clutter surrounding him. Stacks of papers filled with scribbled notes and contact details fluttered slightly in the morning breeze. Every minute seemed weighed down by anticipation and dread. Today would mark a shift. He needed to put his learning into practice. Jim had hours of research behind him, but it was learning to navigate human emotions and deception that posed the most considerable challenge. As he sipped coffee, its bitter taste sharpened his sensory awareness. He had found a potential ally, a former associate of Derek who had fallen out with him over a deal gone bad. This person possessed invaluable insight, but was also a wild card. Their motives were uncertain, much like everyone in this nefarious section of his world. He reviewed his notes. What was it he needed to prove to this new contact? Trust, perhaps, but it felt tenuous at best. Having been betrayed before, Jim understood the value of presenting his intentions clearly. He reminded himself of his mission: protect Emily at all costs. If it required him to approach riskier individuals with his earnestness, he was prepared to do it. Arriving at the coffee shop where he planned to meet the contact, Jim's heart raced. This place was a crossroads, with flickering tables and the muted conversations of patrons fulfilling their morning rituals. He spotted her, a woman in her 40s, ink-black hair pulled back in a tight bun. As he approached, her eyes remained focused, perhaps sizing him up. "Jim, was it? You came alone," she said, a faint edge of suspicion in her tone. "Yeah," he replied, taking a seat across from her. "I've got something important to discuss." "Everyone does," she said simply, stirring her coffee. "What's yours?" He took a deep breath. "I need information on Derek. I have a stake in this, and I'm willing to negotiate what you need." As their conversation unfolded, he felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was his first tangible step into the very shadows he feared. Every revelation she shared, the hidden networks, the hushed whispers, the dark deals, wrapped around him like a heavy cloak, and he felt himself shrinking under its weight. "You don't truly grasp what you're dealing with, do you?" she said, after a particularly chilling account of Derek's reputation. "If you think you can outsmart him, you're in over your head." Her piercing gaze felt like a challenge. The sensation sent shivers through him, yet he refused to back down. "I know the risks, but I need a way in. I have someone to protect." Her demeanor shifted slightly, the edge softening. "It's more complicated than you think, Jim. People get hurt, lives ruined. You might find yourself tangled in a scenario that makes it impossible to turn back." He locked eyes with her, a steely determination igniting. "I can't afford to think that way. I'm already in this. I just need to know how best to navigate it." She considered his words, weighing her next move with deliberation. "If you're willing to take your time, there are skills I can teach you, things that will help you survive. But no, every lesson has its consequences." He hesitated, the weight of her proposition heavy in the air. What would it mean to learn from her? What could he sacrifice to become the man he needed to be for Emily? "It's a deal," he finally asserted, confidence blooming in his chest. The stakes were high, but this moment was his chance to reclaim control of his life. As she began to outline the first lesson, a bizarre mix of instinctual intuition and street smarts, Jim felt a surge of empowerment wash over him. He was transforming, stepping into someone who could protect his daughter, perhaps even challenging the very system that had wronged him. Yet as he absorbed her teachings, a gnawing doubt resurfaced. How far was he willing to go? Each lesson came at a price, and he sensed the erosion of his moral foundations. Jim left the coffee shop with more than just fragmented strategies. He felt invigorated, yet burdened by the cloak of darkness he had willingly donned. The narrative of his life was shifting, and while he welcomed this new chapter, the cost loomed ominously. That evening, while preparing for another meeting, he wondered what heinous truths he might uncover about Derek, and more pressingly, what he would become in pursuit of them. Would he emerge victorious, or would the shadows consume him entirely? Jim stared into his reflection, pondering the growing divide between the man he was and the man he needed to become. What he wouldn't realize until it was too late was that the world had already marked him for change. As the sun dipped below the horizon, silencing the last echoes of daylight, uncertainty seeped into his thoughts. The next encounter would draw him further into Derek's realm. But with this growing resolve, Jim prepared to confront whatever lay ahead. Would he be strong enough to bear the burden of victory? The dim light of dawn crept into Jim's living room, weaving through the blinds and illuminating the chaos he had turned into his sanctum. Papers littered every surface, bearing witness to his transformation from a passive protector to an engaged warrior, ready to stand his ground for Emily's safety. It had taken days of relentless networking, nights spent analyzing the intricacies of deception, and self-doubt clashed heavily against a new resolve as he'd prepared for the confrontation to come. With each passing day, his focus sharpened, and the weight of responsibility shifted into a solid determination. This morning, leaning over a hastily drawn map of the docks, he felt the familiar thrill of confidence coil tightly in his chest. The notion of confronting Derek wasn't merely about power, it was about reclaiming control over the narrative of his life, ensuring he could guide Emily towards a future untainted by the burdens he had carried for too long. He replayed the lessons he'd learned from his new ally and the revelations that had shaped his perspective. Learning to navigate the subtle currents of deception had shifted his awareness dramatically. No longer was he a passive observer. He had forged collaborations with allies operating in the shadows and armors of strategy. The lessons were mental drills for endurance and resilience, honing his awareness until each decision felt razor-sharp and deliberate. Standing at the window, he felt the cool air wash away remnants of doubt. He envisioned what he would face at the docks, the confrontation hanging like a storm cloud, promising a shift that could forever alter the course of his and Emily's lives. In his mind, he saw the fragmented outline of Derek, the figure who had haunted his past, and now potentially offered a path forward. Was it a trap, or would it prove the catalyst of his reinvention? Clenching fists at his side, Jim prepared to step back into the chaos he'd sought to control. As he made his way to the docks, clarity rang true. He wasn't merely protecting Emily, he was redefining the very essence of who he could become. Arriving at the site marked on his map, Jim's pulse quickened as he scanned the shadows of dilapidated warehouses. The air was thick with a salty breeze, laced with a sense of impermanence. The perfect stage for his confrontation. He understood the value of patience, calculated and methodical, but beneath that veneer lay a current of urgency pushing him forward. As he approached the designated meeting spot, the outline of Derek emerged, shrouded in darkness, yet unmistakably familiar. The banter between them had always conveyed an interplay fraught with tension, so it stood to reason this time wouldn't be any different. But this time, Jim felt different. "You're early," Derek said, his tone laced with skepticism. Taking a breath, Jim stepped closer, grounding himself in resolve. "I'm ready." "What are you ready for, Jim? Another round of bravery?" Derek chuckled, but Jim could tell his tone had shifted, masking curiosity with the edge of condescension. "You've dabbled in the shadows. Do you even understand the game being played?" "I understand I'm done being in the dark. I came here to confront you about what you're involved in, and to make it clear that Emily matters more than your little games." Jim fired back, pushing back against the habitual shadows of self-doubt that had clung to him. Derek raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You're taking this quite seriously, But what I'm offering isn't a game. It's an opportunity to step out from under that past you're clinging to. You'll have power. You'll gain influence. The words rang insidious, echoing against the fabric of Jim's resolve. Would he fall prey to the allure of power? His heart raced but steadied with each stolen moment of clarity gained amid the noise. No, Jim replied firmly, emboldened by something deeper than a mere desire for safety. I'm here to reclaim the narrative of my life, to protect Emily from men like you, not to become one. A flicker of surprise crossed Derek's expression before he masked it beneath a hardened facade. This is rich, but wrong choices in your pursuit can lead to disastrous consequences. I already understand consequences. I lived them. Now I'm choosing something different, Jim breathed, every syllable reinforcing his commitment. A tense standoff ensued as Derek leaned against the rough wall, calculating Jim as if sizing him up for a fight. The air thickened around them. Things left unspoken hung heavily. Perhaps it's time to see what this narrative looks like, Derek finally admitted, his tone disarming. But remember, storm or not, you'll have enemies to reckon with. You can't shield what you care for forever. I'm ready to face whatever comes, together, against whatever forces we encounter. You won't control me or what I care about, Jim asserted. As if a switch had been flipped, Derek's demeanor morphed from a hunter sizing up his prey to a cautious strategist. You think you have the upper hand? You're still playing in the shallow end. Maybe, Jim countered, his confidence growing as he pressed on. But my daughter's safety is worth any storm. Lingering uncertainty hung in the air as Derek regarded him in silence. Had Jim finally summoned enough courage to stand firm against the chaos of both his past and that which loomed ahead? All right, Jim, let's see if you can swim. I have intel on Emily's relation to all this, but to change the game, you need support. Are you willing to embrace the storms? Doubt crept in around the edges once more, fear flickering somewhere deep within, yet stubbornly unwavering in its resolve. Yes, but on my terms. As they entered a tentative alliance, what soon became apparent was that the crossing of paths with Derek didn't just represent a return to the shadows, but a recalibration of Jim's identity. He was shifting from protector to architect, not just guarding walls, but crafting fortifications for Emily's future. With greater clarity, Jim felt the fulcrum of his journey shift beneath him. He had wrestled with his fears, confronted the specters of his past, and now forged ahead, no longer passive, but actively navigating his path. Together with Derek, they moved deeper into the interconnected world, both familiar and foreign. Jim steeling himself with the resolve to protect Emily, determined to establish a foundation that would not crumble in the storm. Today marked merely one chapter in a larger story, a journey worth traversing, but not without embracing the tumult of challenges ahead. As he set forth into the unfamiliar backdrop of this new reality with the steadfastness of a man reborn, Jim understood this was not just about survival. It was about creating a legacy, a space where Emily would thrive, no longer sheltered from storms, but a part of the broader narrative defining her existence. With new alliances formed and the weight of his past spurring him onward, Jim was ready for whatever might come next. Now more than ever, he was capable of redefining achieving strength through vulnerability. If he was to succeed, there were battles ahead, not all of them against Derek, but within himself, as he wove the newfound tenets of power with the unwavering depth of love he had for Emily. The dawn had broken on a new era for Jim, and he would embrace the forthcoming storms, unyielding and resolute. Each day would be a testament to growth, a transformation woven from trials, sacrifices, and an ever-deepening acknowledgement of what it truly meant to protect those he loved. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now. To feed the algorithm, it makes a difference. Comment below your reactions and theories about this conclusion. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformative journey. Don't wait even one more second to share.